I figured I'll go out for football. Why can't I eat like them? And the coach was a guy, he was a cruel son of a bitch. You excuse the expression.
That's all right. You can speak
His
freely.
name was Samuels, and he was disgraced later for taking money, you know, from, he was, but for this, I mean, he was just a hard taskmaster, and he couldn't stand losing. So he realized I came out for football, and I did it for the meals. He had his guys work me over, and I want to tell you, they did a job on me. They would kick me in the groin, you know, and every chance they got, they made it miserable for me. And I kept sticking it out, and finally the guys themselves came over to me and they said, Harry, you're gonna get killed, he said. So I said, all right, I quit, the hell with it. I'll eat the regular food. I had their respect and everything, but I mean, it was...
the slop, right?
Did you run track in high school? or
Yeah,
college?
no, I ran in farm school. I ran cross country.
Okay.
And
And what was your nickname?
Flash, which I was everything but. It was a great 3 years of my life. I mean,
How he makes himself understood.
and I made beautiful friends there.
Who were some of your friends that you made?
Seligman and Frankel and Steve Levinson
Was Leo Perkis your friend from farm school?
and Perkis. Yeah, Leo. And in fact, two of them went on this trip with me after we graduated, and we bummed around the country. And
Yeah, tell me about that. You bought a car for that trip, right?
yes,
What kind of car was that?
it was a Cord. I think it was a Cord. I paid $45 for it used, a Roadster. And it took us across the country and back, and broke down on the George Washington Bridge. We had to push it off and took the subway home.
Now, where did you go on the trip?
Well, we followed a harvest trail, and we wound up in just short of California. We tried to get to every national park that we could, you know, and when we ran out of money, we'd work, you know, do some harvesting, and we really realized I had taken a test, you know, for a park department before we left, and in calling home one day, my folks told me that the park department called me, and that my job would be waiting for me. So we called it a day, you know, and we decided to go home then, you know. And,
Now, there was one particular time, one particular memory you told me about a milkman. Could you tell us that
yeah,
story?
this was in Lincoln, Nebraska. We came there in the middle of the night, and we decided to sleep out in the park. There was a park there, and we never slept in a hotel or anything or an inn. We always just slept in the open, and
Just out under the stars?
we're right next to the car. So
With a
we
tent?
spread out a few blankets and we lay down and we went to sleep. In the morning, as day broke, I open my eyes and I see 2 bottles of milk and buns and cake. And I look up and I see the milkman walking away, you know. He had seen us there, and in those days it wasn't it was a common sight because a lot of people, it was still the Depression. So I mean, but they had it in them to help you.
Now, after you got back from the trip, you started working in the parks department, right?
Right.
What was that job like?
Well, I was an assistant gardener, and I worked with all with a couple of Irishmen, and I became Irish myself. And one of them, I can't even remember his name. He taught me every Irish song that you could think of.
Very
that the
40s
old
ones.
bards used to sing in Ireland to keep up their history.
What songs were they? Do you remember any?
Yeah.
Well, from Cave and Barry to
Her
to
Irish
bawdy songs.
40 songs.
What do you mean by bawdy song?
Dirty.
Oh. Grandma, why don't you move in a little bit so I can get both of you?
You want to sing one of them for him?
Yeah, what was that one with
Your Irish gun.
Oh, my Irish gun was full of fun.
Katie, listen to
With
this.
battle bright and clear, and I fired a shot in her red eye hot, and I broke her tambourine. I cried, fair maid, don't be afraid, or otherwise think me green, for both night and day I'll carry the key of your broken tambourine. That's what he taught me. And he used to have an old corncob pipe sticking out of his mouth. The man was as big as a house. Picked up. I mean, he was really something.
Now he had a saying about the race, right?
Oh yeah, every morning he'd say to me, "Oh, it's a grand day for the race, Harry." And I'd say, "What race?" He'd say, "The human race."
Now,
How do you remember all that?
You remember the
I remember all these stories you tell me, Grandma.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, up between that time and the time you met Grandma, were there any other ladies in the picture that we should know about?
Well, I knew people. I mean,
You dated?
huh?
Did you date? DATE. Did you date?
Zoom in on Grandma and
Well,
and the
I was
reaction.
kind
of
of a
this
horny
person.
guy then.
You were?
Yeah.
He had a girlfriend that was a nurse. Really? Right? She called once when you were at the house.
But anyway, I don't want to bring up other
Okay.
things like that.
Now, Grandpa, I want you to tell me what circumstance or how you occasioned to meet Grandma.
Well, I hung out, like I told you, with Yitz Frankel and Seligman and the fellas from farm school. We were New York boys, and we became friends because we lived in the city. So nobody really stayed with a farm, even though they went to farm school. As a matter of fact, in my yearbook, they put down what they predict you'll be. They wrote on, "You'll be a tailor."
Dry cleaner. He wants to be a farmer, but he'll be a dry cleaner.
So,
So anyway, we used to go bowling a lot, and we'd see foreign movies and go to parties. And Max had a cousin who was a painter. I mean, a real an
Good artist, yeah.
So we used to hang out a lot down in Orchard Street around. He used to have a gallery down there, and we met when they had the WPA at that time.
the War Powers Act. Right?
They had the government paid for artists to
Subsidized.
help them
Yeah.
get over, and they had plays that they ran.
Excuse me, what
So-
does WPA mean? War Powers Act?
Right?
Is it?
War Powers Act, right, Grandma?
No, I don't think.
No, it didn't
I don't
mean
think
war
it has
power.
that.
It was before the war.
Okay.
No,
Is this when they pay people to
Works.
draw murals and stuff?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There was that movie Frida.
It was like Public Works or something.
Yeah.
That's what it was, but I guess it was backwards. But anyway,
Grandma, you coming up soon?
Clifford Odets, all these playwrights and all, they wrote Waiting for Lefty, and all these different plays were all done on WPA money. And to this day, I mean, I can't think of her name, but there's somebody very famous who I saw in the WPA play years ago.
yeah, they had a very active group.
What was I up to then now?
Well, when was the first time you heard reference to Beatrice
Oh,
Bimel?
So as I said, I threw you off on that.
No, that's okay.
But we used to hang out in the 42nd Street cafeteria after we got through bowling, and they had good meals there, and it was very reasonable. And then we'd all break up and go home. So this one day, we're there, and my brother Saul was there with Sue and their gang. They 5 years older than me. My brother's group was, although I knew all of them, but we didn't hang out. And Sue said to me, oh no, we went bowling, right? And it was at the bowling alley after the 40th Street 7 captivity. And Sue said to me, Harry, I have a cute red-headed sister at home. Would you like to meet her? You know. I said, sure. And that's how it happened. And they invited us out for dinner one day, and Sari, who was a cousin, there wasn't that much room in the car. She sat on my lap, you know, on the way out. And when we got to their house in Bayonne, B saw that Sari was sitting on my lap, and she figured probably that I have something going with Sari. So she didn't know me or anything. She never met me. And so nothing happened that first time. Sue said to her on
Yeah,
the
I took her in
side.
the kitchen,
right,
I said,
says,
hey, I asked him to come to meet you and talk to you. You're ignoring him, why are you doing that? So she said, well, Sari sat on his lap for an hour and a half. I thought maybe she, you know, she has first dibs. So, I don't know, then it evolved. But I saw right away, I told B that and I told my mother that. Something clicked, Mom, there's gonna be something out of that. And I saw the way they looked at each other. And he said to her, could I see you again?
Yeah,
Said
next
to me.
time
Yeah.
I met her, that was it. I mean, I kissed her in the pantry, I remember.
And then he made a date with her and he never showed
And
up.
I broke it. I was a bad guy, I told you. I was
Wait,
a
let me
bad
stop
guy.
you there because I'm sure Grandma wants to be here for that. But
Yeah.
this would so kindly introduce yourselves. Starting on the right, I'm not gonna say the more graceful because I don't want to imply anything about age.
You could.
Okay, the elder sister. Not that either of you are any less graceful than the other.
All right. Oh, you're so diplomatic. But I'm 5 years older than B. So let's get that on the table right now.
Okay. Now, please introduce yourself.
Okay.
Full names.
I'm Sue Gilbert.
Were you born Sue Gilbert?
Yes, I was born in 1916.
No.
Oh, Sue
What?
Bynell.
What was your name?
Oh, no. My birth certificate reads Sophie Sue.
Sophie.
By Mel. Yeah, well,
Sue, you being your middle name,
yeah.
and you, ma'am, on the left,
Ma'am on the left?
the younger of the two.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Bayonne, and my birth certificate was Beatrice Bymel.
What did you have a middle name?
No.
Okay.
Would you
No, I
like,
didn't.
You're poor, they couldn't afford it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we couldn't
Okay.
afford them. That's right.
Now, what I want to ask is, are your grandparents from?
Oh, all right. Should I answer?
You
this?
answer that.
Okay.
Oh.
Both my grandparents, like you have the history of Harry's parents, they, the grandparents were in a town called Parich in
How do you spell that?
Parich,
No.
Okay.
Okay.
or something like that. It was part of Russia, but now it's changed or something.
Is it Belarus where Minsk?
Yeah,
Okay.
Belarus. How do you know?
I know these things.
Well, you're telling-
And Harry's parents came from Poland, but what they called at that time shtetls, in other words, the little communities outside the big communities, the people in Europe used to call them shtetls. So my folks came from a certain shtetl called Parich, and Harry's folks came from a shtetl in Poland called
Novi.
Novodwor, right?
Mhm. How do you spell Novodwor?
N-O-V,
N-O-V-D-W-O-R, something like, it's
yeah,
in Polish, it's,
D-W-O-R.
And that's outside of Warsaw, right?
right.
Someplace, yeah, in there.
Okay.
Now, to get back to my parents, my father was 10 or 12 years older than my mother.
Well, I'm sorry. I just don't mean to cut you off, but I was just wondering if you knew your grandparents' names.
Yeah, my grandparents, my father's father was called Saul, S-A-U-L. My father's mother was called Hinda.
Bymel?
Yeah, Bimel, H-I-N-D-A. My mother's father was called Shimsel,
Shimpel, S-E-L?
Shimsel, Shimsel, right.
Okay.
And my mother's name was called Bella
And what was
Yeah.
your mother's maiden name? Their name?
Newman.
Newman.
Okay.
And anyway,
Okay.
they lived in an adjoining house. My paternal grandparents and my maternal grandparents lived in an adjoining house. My paternal grandmother used to be a baker, made Danish and, you know, different stuff. The husband was a cantor of that, correct? Yeah.
Are we in agreement here, Grandma?
No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought she was talking about the maternal grandmother.
Oh, okay.
My maternal grandmother was what they called a dairy, ran a dairy, you know, with sweet cream and
Dairy maid.
cows in the back and so forth.
Now here's just another quick question to cut you off. Whose family were the horse thieves?
No, that was
No,
mine.
no,
That was Harry's.
Okay.
You remember that story?
yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that
Yeah,
later.
Yeah, no. And
That's Army.
now since my father was 10 years older than my mother, when he left for America, he really didn't know my mother. I mean, she was just 3 years old,
But
I
he
guess.
But he-
Excuse me.
Pardon?
Did he babysit
Could I
you?
interrupt?
Sure.
I hate to, but this is in sequence. When he was 10 years old and they lived next door, and my grandmother, Newman, who we never met our grandparents, they never came here to the United States. My grandmother Newman was busy with the dairy, so she used to ask this little 10-year-old boy who lived next door to babysit for a little while. And he babysat my mother, who was then 10 years, he must have been 12 and she must
She
have
was
been
3?
2. Yeah, 2 or 3. No, she was bad.
Maybe you-
She was sitting
younger.
up. She was younger. So, anyway, he loved to study. He figured he'll babysit and study. And she was sitting in the carriage and crying. And he didn't like that. So he noticed that when she looked at the kerosene lamp on the table, it would distract her. So he kept pushing it over while he was studying, and she was looking at the lamp until she finally reached out and touched it. And she screamed. And he got so nervous, he left and ran in the woods, and they couldn't find her. He left her alone, she was crying. And he ran and hid in the woods.
You panicked.
Yes, he hid in the woods. And they had to find him, and, you know, she ran in from the barn or something, because Mom was screaming, she was alone. But it was a distraction. He didn't see her after that for 10 years. You know, that was it.
No.
Yeah.
Because he left the town to seek his fortune in America, and his brother was already here in America. His sister was here, and he came to America, and he came in 1910. I have that because of the recent one, and he came in through Tennessee,
Yeah.
through Texas.
Galveston.
I'm sorry, I don't want to stop your story,
Yeah.
but
Right.
before you get to the United States, did they describe what life was like
Yes.
in Russia?
Yeah.
Could you
These
tell
are
us
the
a little
little
bit about that?
stories that I know. You know, there was no they all felt there was no future. However, in my father's family, the children were very bright. I don't know how they were in my mother's family, but my uncle, who was my grandfather was a cantor, and the women in that town or in any, if the man had a notable position, so the women made the living. The men prayed and they studied the Talmud and
She the one that wrote the liturgical music?
yeah. So the
No,
so
Uncle
the-
Yanko
no.
did that.
So the grandfathers
liturgical.
had 2 sons. One was my uncle, an older one, and one was my father, the younger one. Now the older one had musical talent and wanted to be a conductor, a musician. He had a decent
Composer,
voice, I
yes.
guess. So he was, I don't know how they saved the money, but he went to Germany to study liturgical music. You know, he wrote for the synagogues and and churches too.
Yeah, and
And
to
he
study
studied in
at the
in,
university then.
in
Berlin,
Germany.
in
Could I
Berlin.
interrupt 1 second? There's a photo that we have, I remember
Yes.
seeing
Yeah.
With the
your
little
dad
description, yes.
Yeah.
in a bowler hat or
Bowler
something
hat, yeah.
in Germany.
Right,
Yes.
right.
You always said that was in Berlin.
Yeah,
Yes.
right, right.
Was
I
that
know
at that
that-
time
Yeah,
period?
no, after my uncle was there, you know, and studied and graduated from there, they called for my father, thinking that he can do the same thing. But obviously, either my father lost interest or he knew he didn't have the talent of his brother, and so he decided to come to America. Now, because their father was a pious, religious man, I guess, he was a cantor, he used to tell my father, the best occupation that never goes out of style, never have to look for a job, is to be a mezuzah rider. You know,
There's
it's
a little
right.
prayer
The
in the
little
mezuzah.
prayer. Now, it happens that my father wrote very well. He studied hard, and he was a good scribe. He used to write for the people who had sons and daughters who left here for America, and he would translate the letters and write letters for them. But when my grandfather told him, you know, that's the best occupation for him, he should have he should concentrate on that. He really didn't want that. So he became, as an apprentice, a coppersmith.
Tinsmith.
Tinsmith.
Like copper pots, you know, coppersmith, tinsmith, whatever. And from that he learned draftsmanship. Okay, and then he came to America. Now, he came to Kansas City because his sister had landed in Kansas City because her husband had a brother who landed in Kansas City.
That's how they
You
came.
know, everybody went to somebody who either underwrote them.
But they all came in through Galveston, Texas, though?
That section
was it.
did, because that
That was
was the center of, and it reminds me of in Fiddler on the Roof, when they have to leave their shtetls and they're all, leaving because of pogroms. One man says to the other, "Oh, you're leaving for New York? Give regards to my brother in Chicago," because they didn't know the proximity of, and so if my Uncle Joe, who was the brother-in-law of my father, if he came because of his brother, and my father came because his sister was married to
Omaha.
Uncle Joe,
Yeah.
they came to Kansas City. Now, he gets a job in Kansas City.
All right, wait. I'm sorry, Auntie, to cut you off, but I just want to try to squeeze out a couple more stories. I remember Aunt Rose told one story about a fire.
Oh,
Um,
she told me that.
all right.
All right, that's a different.
Yeah, I just want to stay
Okay.
in
Yeah.
Europe for a little while, and then we'll
Okay,
get
no,
to
that's
My
America.
different.
mother's town.
Yeah,
That's in his mother.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, the different side of the family.
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Now,
Get back.
They
What?
know the story.
when my mother came to America, she was 15,
Mhm.
and she came through a fluke too. But I don't know if I ought to tell that.
Please, please.
fluke.
Now's the time.
now's the
we
time.
want to. This is the age and the era we want to
Yeah,
get.
okay. My mother had an older sister in her
Watch
family.
your ear.
And that older sister was already married, and her husband came to America maybe 5 years before he sought his fortune. He came to Omaha. The circumstances why he went to Omaha, I don't know, but that's where he landed. He opened some sort of a fruit business, made a little money, and now he went back to get his family. He went back to
Russia.
to Russia, to the town. He wanted to bring his wife and the 3 kids, I think they had then, to bring them to America. All the papers were in order, and lo and behold, after they were about to leave, she found out she was pregnant.
That was time to live it?
No, that was Schiffer.
Oh.
So now he has a ticket for a wife to go back, but he can't take her back because they wouldn't allow her into Ellis Island, you know, with the, if she was pregnant. So I don't know, they had restrictions about, you know, being born here and not. So so my mother, who was from what I gather, a beautiful, robust-looking girl, you know, he said, you know, Ethel, I can't take Sifrit, my wife, with me, but you could come with me as my daughter. You know, she was 15, he may have been 30, 28, I don't know. So she came under the guise of his daughter. Now at that time, there wasn't anything like, it wasn't right or something, because the women went in steerage anyway, and the men, you know, there was no couples living together in the boats. So she came as Ethel Kaplan, which meant the daughter of Mr. Kaplan. Her real name was Newman. She was a Newman, you know. Now I'm bringing this up because years later when she applied for citizenship, I remember she tortured herself. I came in as Kaplan. What if they should find out I'm really Newman?
Hello?
Hi.
Hey.
They won't, you know, they may not give me the papers
Hello?
and so forth. So, you know, that was torture for her, but somehow she did get the papers, and that was that. Now, they met in Kansas City. No, my mother went to Omaha, and in the old country they wrote to my father that Bella's daughter will be going to Omaha, and if you could, look her up and you'll find out, you know, about the family. So she did, and he looked her up, and of course you have to remember, she was 16 or 17, and he was 10 or 12 years older, and he was a young, lovely girl, you know, from the same town. He knew the family, so they fell in love, and they married like a year or so later, and I was born a year or so after that.
In
Kansas
Kansas
City.
City.
I was born in Kansas City, and lived there until I was 4, and then they came to the East Coast because this uncle, who now became a cantor,
Uncle
Uncle Jacob, yeah, and had
Jacobs
Oh, yeah.
Vimel, right?
I know, right, and
Kansas
he,
City, Kansas, right?
Kansas City, Oklahoma, right?
Iowa.
Missouri.
Is it Missouri?
Missouri.
Missouri, yeah, Kansas City, Missouri, and that's how they met. Now speed along
Working?
to
Yeah.
how we met.
It's done. It's done. It's
So who?
going back.
How you and Grandma met?
No, we.
All right. Well,
Your sister.
well, before I get you to Uncle Sal, I want to get the entire picture first.
All right. What-
So
what-
let's get now to where Grandma. Where were you born?
I was born in Bayonne, New Jersey, and my parents, what I can remember, I think I can remember, had a grocery store
Yeah.
when I was small, and my mother ran the store. We had an apartment in the back of the store, and she would run it. My father in the morning would get all the orders together, deliver them to different people, and then he'd go to work at Singer Sewing Machine in Elizabeth, and my mother would run the store for the afternoon. These are the stories I heard because I was an
Yeah,
infant.
that's true.
And so it was hard work for them, you know, to really get their roots in Bayonne. And they came to Bayonne because they went to give regard. He was living at that time in Brooklyn, I think, or in Manhattan. They came to see Serpin to give regards to them.
Oh.
And this was a man that had a grocery store in Bayonne. And he said to my father, you know, it would be a nice business. There's a store for sale in Bayonne. I mean, they had just come over
Yeah.
from Kansas City. So that's how they got into Bayonne. And I'll tell you, I think after I see what happens to kids growing up in New York now, or different areas, I think I had a very nice childhood in Bayonne. I really did. Growing up, we made very fast friends.
Well, tell us about some of those friends.
Well, one of my friends I went to kindergarten with, and I'm still in touch with.
And what's her